Good afternoon. Edmond here, speaking to you from Brussels, where I now live. I am Secretary for Ecology in the Jesuit European Social Centre, and the house I live in, as you see, has a very nice garden, but not quite as nice as Venice because it doesn't have a fig tree. But let's begin about faith and politics. Let's begin with Venice and our memories of that city. They include the beauty, the sheer magnificence, the sense of history, but they go deeper than that for us. Our memory of Venice is about a quiet place where you walked by foot or went by boat. Nothing could be rushed. We were able to calm down in each other's company and listen to ourselves and to each other. We didn't come as tourists, although we had our share of tourism, but we had a preoccupation, something bound up with the title of the workshop we came to. In the early years, it was called Politics, a Challenge for Faith. And then it became the Venice Faith and Politics Workshop. Venice is a particular place, particularly important in Europe, and the workshop has always had a European outreach. But Venice is also the place where a group of friends decided to form what became the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And again, this workshop has always been rooted in the Jesuit vision. Those friends had a dream. They wanted to go to Jerusalem and to spend the rest of their lives there, helping souls, as they put it. But their dream was swept aside by political reality. Venice was to be their point of departure for the Holy Land, and ships were still leaving the docks. But they were leaving to fight battles. No one was going anywhere except to fight. Venice was at war. Now, this workshop is also about the confrontation between our dreams and reality. The hope of those of us who organized it through the years is that those of you who have been in the workshop have ended up better equipped to deal with that confrontation. When that group of friends 5 centuries ago saw their dream being swept away, they were able to go deeper and to find a new way of channeling their generosity, the generosity which inspired their original hope. Now we know, those of us in the organising team, we know that those of you who came to Venice down the years came with a similar generosity. We've seen it for ourselves. We know that public service for you was more than about ambition or power or gain. Of course, 7 days in Venice is always an agreeable prospect, but there was more to those days than just a good time, which we certainly had. The lectures, the sharing groups, the meals, the outings to the city, the conversation, the laughter, and the sheer fun. All these things were a kind of container for something which cannot be easily defined or held down. Something of the spirit. We, the organisers, could not have provided this. It was brought there by you. And everything else about the Venice Faith and Politics Workshop flows from this, your dreams, your generous attitude. All we could do is respond. Though we can give ourselves credit for devising a program which met what you sought. It has worked well through the years, and each group of participants have expressed their satisfaction with it. The original program has changed to some degree, but you'll all be familiar with the general themes. Monday, faith and society in Europe. Tuesday, political evolution in Europe and national stories. Wednesday, Catholic social teaching and witnessing from different aspects of public life. Thursday, Jesus' response to power and a visit to St. Mark's as a different sign of faith and politics in a different world. Friday, an encounter with a significant political figure. And finally, Saturday, concluding with reflection on God in all things. You'll all be familiar with those themes to some extent, and you'll have memories associated with the different days. The external program, however, was just one part of the story. You'll remember well, each day we met in small groups, and the membership remained unchanged from the beginning to the end of each workshop. These groups were the engine room in which you participants played the primary role in challenging each other and supporting each other and forming each other. And as the week progressed and trust deepened, people opened up with both their pain and their most cherished hopes. From the very start, this has always been the most powerful driving force of our Venice. But how have things changed down the years? Is there much difference between those who came through the door on that first Sunday in 2006 and the arrivals who came, most recent arrivals who came 2 years ago? There's no difference really in the underlying attitude of public service, but the circumstances in which they live out that calling has changed a good deal. In 2006, the European Union was living through a moment of bliss. The revolution, which had begun in 1989 with the collapse of the Berlin Wall, had come to a happy and bloodless conclusion. 10 countries, which had laboured under Soviet oppression for more than 4 decades after World War II, were now member states of a greatly expanded union. There were problems, of course, but it's hard to figure out what they were at this distance. Two years after 2006, the financial crash arrived, and with it, the Greek crisis. Tensions emerged between two different camps. The privileged are the responsible, are the impoverished are the irresponsible. However you describe these divisions, they indicate a deepening mutual misunderstanding within the European Union. This can also be seen in the slowly deepening division between the post-communist member states and others. Issues of migration and ecology, quite apart from the challenges which they represent in themselves, have served to deepen these divisions. When the different member states of the within the different member states of the European Union, politics has become increasingly faction-driven and divisive. Brexit being the most telling example of this development. Beyond Europe, the world has become a much darker place. There's a growing emphasis on national and sectional identity as a source of security, but without any sense of a wider dialogue and responsibility. Issues such as climate change and pollution require an element of popular mobilization and education which existing administrative systems are not equipped to deal with. Increasingly, as with the COVID crisis, our problems are global and need a global solution. All this accumulation of unfamiliar challenges means that anyone inspired by the value of public service faces a bewildering reality. They are also more likely to encounter political paralysis and corruption as systems disintegrate and forms of leadership lose their credibility. Even before 2018, the organisers of the workshop were becoming aware that that the participants were looking more to the interior work of the sharing groups than to the external presentations of the plenary sessions. This was not in any way a retreat from the more public and political aspects of the calling to public service. On the contrary, it was in response to the growing dysfunction of political life, of public life, a dysfunction which required them and requires us all to dig deeper. Of course, if this analysis is valid, it will find a resonance in the wider group of former participants, in yourselves. We would sum up the insight like this: the greater the external challenge, the more we need to dig deep within to find the source of our hope. The organising team developed and redesigned the 2020 workshop on the basis of this insight. And, well, one benefit of the COVID crisis and its delay is that we now have an opportunity to reflect further and to include you, the workshop alumni, in that reflection. First, we would value your help in designing the future shape of the workshop. Secondly, if this need to go deep is real, can it be justified by a once-off 7-day event? Is there a need for something ongoing? And if so, how can that need best be met? Imagine for a moment that you are arriving into the hostel in Campo di Gesuiti for the 2020 Venice Faith and Politics Workshop. You will already have sent in, as required by the organisers, a written reflection on your own experience of public service. However limited that might be. Remember, you might be starting out. You're not the age you all are now. You will also have seen the programme as it appears on the Faith and Politics website. Let's go through that and reflect on it. Firstly, each day will begin with a plenary session to introduce the topic of the day, followed by a reflection group to discuss that topic. The plenary session will be brief. The members of these reflection groups will change from day to day, but the small groups and the end-of-day examiner prayer and the visits to the city will remain. The key difference is that each daily theme will reflect in a more focused way the learning process of the small group. So, we begin on Monday with the experience of reflecting on our own lives as we decide to introduce ourselves to the group. And we want to hear the different themes that come up. But it's from our experience we begin. On Tuesday, we are invited to reflect on the personal challenge posed by the realities of power. The group will have an opportunity to meet someone who has had to deal with dysfunctional power. This challenge is key to the formative experience, both of the workshop and in particular of the small group. Wednesday will be about the experience of community with each of us. Each one will be asked to think of the communities to which they belong and the role they play in their life. The small group itself, of course, is a very crucial experience of community. Thursday is about the wider communities, the maybe cities, localities, but also the nations and also Europe itself. This has always been a feature of the workshop and an enrichment of the Venice experience, the presentation of national stories. On the Friday, we look at the question of conscience. Public service is about being open to the awkward question. Community isn't the answer in itself. We've got to look outside, to the awkward questioner, to the new unexpected horizon. Good example, what we're living through, the COVID pandemic. Only with an open conscience can communities move beyond complacency and self-interest, and without it, they just settle in to being self-interested. The underlying purpose of this redesign, of this event, is to, the underlying purpose of this workshop is to equip people with a deeper personal vision which will enable them to meet the challenges of public service in a world which is going to become increasingly bewildered and bewildering. Now, if I have not referred much to the COVID pandemic, it's not because out of any desire to avoid talking about it. It is the world in which we now live. And I'm certainly not anxious to discourage you yourselves from talking about it and its implications. But let me just return to Venice for a moment, because it has something to tell us about the sheer destructiveness of epidemics, and also about the triumph of the human spirit. Two of the most beautiful sights in Venice are of two churches, Il Redentore and Santa Maria della Salute. They were built to give thanks to God for the deliverance from two devastating plagues. Who knows what lies ahead for us all? But people overcame cruel moments of grief and dislocation in the past, and not just in Venice. Humanity is not just a label. It's not just about biology. It's a spiritual reality rooted in this earth, but with the capacity to triumph over every kind of adversity. So now, it's over to you to reflect with each other on the experience of public service which has brought you to this place. You yourselves will now have an opportunity to converse with each other on what you have heard and to share your own thoughts. I will leave you with some questions which might be helpful to your conversation. First, you have heard a brief outline of our new program. What are your first impressions? Secondly, would you find it helpful to hear more? And finally, is there anything in particular you would like us, the organisers of this workshop, to hear? And now it's up to you.